In this video, we're going to look at the round structure and core mechanics of Harry Potter's miniatures adventure game. Alright, the Harry Potter miniature game is played in rounds, and the round sequence is broken up into 5 phases. Start phase, magic phase, initiative phase, activation phase, and end phase. Some of these are far more significant than the others, specifically the magic phase and the action phase. The start phase and the end phase, I'm not going to go into detail because those are actually completely empty phases unless you have a card that says at the start of the round or at the end of the round, and that's where you will do those things. Okay, so let's jump into the magic phase, which has 3 steps. And the one that we are going to specifically talk about right now is replenish let's just do them all. Replenish the power pool. So this is a action point or action pool type of game, similar to Guild Ball or Infinity, where your characters will all contribute to a pool of energy, and then you're going to use that pool of energy to do stuff with your characters. And that is based on your cunning stat. So this stat right here, the number tells you how many points you're going to get, and the color is going to be the type of points you're going to get. So for example, Harry gets 2 light magic points, and these would get added into the pool. You can have dark magic points, in which case you would use the reverse side. It would be dark magic. And I believe if these are gray, then you can get white or black, but there's no gray ones or no gray wizards in the core box. All right, so if you look at Team Hogwarts here, Harry has 2 cunning, Hermione has 2 cunning, and Ron has 1 cunning. So they would get, in this phase, a total of 5 magic points that they would be able to spend on their spellcasting later on in the round. The second thing that you would do is pay upkeep. So for example, Harry's Expecto Patronum has an upkeep of 2. That means after you cast this, you get that Patronus marker within range. If you want to keep that Patronus marker in range, you got to pay 2 power points at this point. So you get all your power points, and then you can pay upkeeps. Mini spells do not have an upkeep. Counterspell does not have an upkeep. All right, and then finally, you would advance your cooldown markers. So Expecto Patronum has cooldown. You actually have one of these cooldown markers. I think it's supposed to be like a time turner. And this will be on every single spell at the start of the game. When you cast it, you will flip this over, and it has an arrow that's pointing up. When you get to the next round and you're in the upkeep phase, you will rotate this until it is pointing at something that says cooldown. So this says cooldown 1. In the next phase, you'll rotate it again until it says something cooldown. So there's cooldown 2. The next phase, you'll rotate it, next round, you'll rotate it again, cooldown 3, and then finally, if you rotate it and it's pointing up, you would flip it over, and that means you can cast the spell again. Not every spell has all of these cooldowns. For example, Stupefy, when you cast it, you flip it over. The first time it goes to cooldown 1, and then next time you see and it's pointing down, it says keep turning, and then it says keep turning. And so you would turn it, and then once it's facing up, you'd flip it over. So Stupefy only has a cooldown of 1. And that's how the cooldown markers and the spell mechanics work. All right, after the magic phase, and you've replenished your power pool, you paid your upkeep, and you have advanced your cooldowns, then comes the initiative phase, in which you just determine initiative for the round, and you determine initiative by adding up cunning. You do not determine initiative by the amount of points that are still in your pool at this point, because you may have paid upkeeps. Instead, you add the cunnings, and so of your whole team, so this is a cunning 5, and if their cunning is more than the other team, then they will activate a model first. This number does not change unless you have models that are taken out of the game because they have suffered too much damage. All right, and then finally, the phase in which all the action occurs is the action phase. All right, so we're going to use Harry Potter and a Death Eater to kind of walk through the action phase. In this particular setup, with the 4 Death Eaters that come in the box and the Hogwarts Trio, the Hogwarts Trio have 5 cunning and the Death Eaters only have 4. So the Hogwarts Trio is going to have initiative, so they're going to get to activate a model first so they could activate Harry Potter. On your activation, you will get 2 actions. You get a normal action and you get an advanced action. You can do them in either order, and you can choose not to do one. But once you do an action, you have to complete it fully before you can perform another action. Your normal actions, you can choose to move, or you can use a potion if you have one. If you choose to move, you just take your character. All characters have a movement of 3, and you can move and you can count diagonals. So I could go 1, 2, 3. Or I could go 1, 2, 3. You actually can move through enemy models. So I could go 1, but it counts as 2 movements. So this would be 1, 2, 3. That's similar to having difficult terrain. The positioning and the movement is not the emphasis in this particular game. The other thing you can do is if you had a potion equipped to your character, instead of moving, you can spend the potion and you just do what it says. So this one is a Polyjuice Potion. User gains concealment 12 until it performs any attack, casts a spell, or receives damage, and then you would discard the potion for the rest of the game. That is the normal action. Your special action is you can either make an attack if you have an attack, which none of these characters do because they do not have innate attacks and they haven't have any weapons equipped, or you can cast a spell, which most of the time you're probably going to be casting spells like Stupefy. So when you're casting a spell, sometimes it is a combat spell, in which case it'll tell you, and you're going to cast combat spells against other characters, and sometimes instead of a combat spell, it's going to be a regular spell. But the base mechanics are the same. The big difference is difficulty. If you're not casting a combat spell, this is the amount of successes you need to get. Stupefy, you see, has 0 because you're actually rolling against your opponent's defense. But the base mechanics of everything is going to be the same. So let's go ahead and we're going to have Harry, since he got to activate first. He's going to try to cast Stupefy on the Death Eater. So what he needs to do is he needs to check the power cost. This is a 1, and since it's gray, it can be light magic or dark magic. So we have to check our pool, which the Hogwarts Trio started with 5. So he has enough. So we're going to spend a power point, and we're going to cast Stupefy. When we do that, if this was sitting here, it would flip over, and the spell would now be activated. You activate the spell regardless if it's successful or not. I'm not going to hold this here the whole time. So then, this is a combat spell, so we would roll dice. Well, we'd also have to check line of sight and range. There's nothing in the way, and the range is 4, so it's fine. The line of sight and range are pretty standard in this game. So then Harry's going to roll his dice, and the Death Eater is going to roll his dice. And we're going to see what happens. Okay. So we're going to pretend that this die was that, and this die was that, for the sake of explaining the mechanics. All right, so you're looking for successes. Successes are going to be any 3 or better. This is a 6. In addition to it being a 6, which is success, this symbol is also an exploding die. So I would roll this again, and that would be another success. So I would have had 1, 2, 3, 4, and you would add your character's mastery. 5, 6. So Harry has 6 successes. So the Death Eater right now has 3. And he's going to have to get up to 6. His mastery is only... his mastery is 2. Death Eater 4 has a mastery of 2. So he is currently at 5. If I can roll another success off of this, then he will block the spell. Alright, he does. And so the spell is blocked. Let's say he did it, and he didn't block the spell. The spell would be executed, which is target model suffers 1 physical damage. Alright, so then you would take your card and you would assign him a damage marker, which is this guy right here. Now, these damage markers are not like these power pool ones, where you're going to have like a pile of them as he accumulates damage. You will only ever have 1 damage marker here unless you have special rules. And so, if you look, this damage marker has a little slash through it. This means 1 damage. If he were to take a 2nd damage, you would flip it over, and we would add the Death Stone to the Elder Wand, and we're going to start drawing the symbol for the Deathly Hallows. And since this has 2 Deathly Hallows on it, that's how you remember that it is 2 damage. If you were to take a 3rd point of damage, we would draw the Invisibility Cloak, and that indicates 3 damage. Your 4th damage, death would come for you. And then if you ever took a 5th damage, then you would be removed from the game. And so you're only ever going to have 1 of these tokens in front of you. at a given time. There are also detriments to having these tokens. If you ever have this token, your spells are going to cost you 1 extra power point. If you ever have this token, you're no longer going to re-roll the Deathly Hallow symbol or this token. You're never going to re-roll the Deathly Hallow symbol when you roll on a dice, so it's pretty bad. All characters can take 4 damage until they are knocked out on the 5th damage, again, unless there are some special rules which allow you to take more damage, if I think that's for like beasts and stuff like that. All right, so that is the core mechanic of spell casting. The other thing that would be worth noting are challenges. So let's say the whole Hogwarts trio were in here, and they had to solve a challenge that was associated with this Death Eater. This is where these stats up here come into play. Everybody has these. And so let's say it's going to be either a magic challenge, a courage challenge, a temper challenge, or a wisdom challenge. So let's say we were doing a temper challenge, and it involved this Death Eater, and it was like a challenge 12. If Harry Potter was taking the challenge, you'd take his temper, which is 9, and you would add it to the temper of Ron and Hermione. You'd add it to he could add to his temper the temper of any of his friendly characters within 3 spaces. And if you exceed that number, you pass, and if you didn't exceed that number, you fail. There's no dice rolling on challenges. Challenges are how you're going to be accomplishing a lot of your objectives to be getting victory points. All right, that is the turn structure, and then after I activated one, the opponent would activate one, and you go back and forth until everybody's activated, and then you do the end phase, and then wrap back around into your next round until you've accomplished either the victory condition of the scenario or you've played out the maximum rounds that the scenario allows. Those are the core mechanics and round structure of the Harry Potter Miniature Adventure game. I didn't talk about everything. I just wanted to give you the quick rundown. If you have any questions, throw it down in the comment below, and I will answer them.